here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Dominic Silvani, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry, all that other groovy stuff, and has been in lots of bands and is still making music. So if you want to know any more information, go to his social media platform sites. But he was in Penelope's Web in the late 80s and 90s, and also another fantastic band called, he says, check in, the Avant-Garde, who you can find on Spotify, but also again on Facebook and also Instagram. But anyway, this is the interview with Dominic. So after several minutes of interest and casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Dominic, it's over to you.
I'm come from a very big family. I'm the youngest of 8. So all my older brothers and sisters who were all into music.
Right.
So I've sort of stolen a bit from all of them, really, I guess. And I had a very eclectic musical experience growing up, you know. So, but the one central mainstay of all my brothers and sisters and me, really, throughout my life was Leonard Cohen.
Oh, blimey, you're right in there with Leonard. And what were your... And did you say you were the youngest at that age?
Yes, exactly.
Right, my God. So,
I mean, I like that. I was a big bunny man. You know, I was a bit of a raincoat brigade. I was sort of 16 in 82, so 14 in 80, yeah. So,
brilliant. Yeah. Perfect age, actually, for all that sort of moping around. And were your parents kind of into music as well? Did they give you...
No, not really. No, not really. It was quite interesting, though. Yes. It was quite an interesting house to walk around, because we lived in a really big house because there were so many of us, and there were different. You could walk through the house, and there'd be different music coming from different rooms. You know, my sister was playing funk, or my brother was playing punk, or my other sister was playing sort of metal type, soft metal, I suppose. Or my other sister was playing Brian Ferry. You know what I mean? This is amazing. It was really.
Yes, well, it would be quite interesting. I always think the older brother and sister kind of influence is huge, really. And I'm the youngest of 3, but I couldn't imagine having another 5 siblings. That would be horrendous. The dynamics of it. What was the age difference between, say, yourself and the eldest? Was that
the oldest, who's no longer with us, he was 13 years older than me. So 8 children in 13 years. Yeah.
Wow, that is
without any twins either.
Blimey, well, there you go. Yes, that's good. And so so you were saying you were 14 when you were in 1980 at that stage.
Yes.
So what was the first gig you went to at this point?
First gig I ever went to, my sister's friend was sort of a local celebrity in bands and stuff, you know, in punk bands in Wolverhampton. I went to see his band, Delayed Reaction, at Wordsley Town Hall, I think it was, something like that. They sneaked me in when I was about 13, 12, something like that.
Yes.
But then I remember going to see the Specials and Madness and Selector at the Civic.
This was about 79, 80 you were seeing these bands?
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
And when did you start sort of developing a passion for sort of playing music or like writing lyrics?
Yeah, we started at school, me and 2 of the original members of Penelope started the band there. Witold Leonovich and Gary McCormick. We went to school together, but we also left home together kind of when we were 16, 17 and set up in a band. You know? Yeah, so it was about then, really. But I'd always been interested in. I mean, you know, I was very interested in lyrics from kind of very early age because of the sort of Leonard Cohen thing, you know.
Yeah, and was people like Bob Dylan or Neil Young or Joni Mitchell, were these the great lyric writers? Were they all part of your kind of...
Dylan and Cohen particularly, but then like Neil Young and all that kind of stuff, but punk as well. You know, lots of really good punk bands, and then like I say, the new wave stuff, Joy Division, Bunnymen, they were all quite sort of lyrics centred, weren't they? Those kind of bands, especially Joy Division. Velvet Underground, as my brother used to play a lot of that to me as well. Lou Reed.
Yes, and I suppose there was Transformer that we all loved back in the early to mid 70s, wasn't it? That sort of conjured up quite an image as well. What did it at that stage? Were people like Nick Drake in your sort of life?
No, I didn't really. It's funny. I know lots of people who really have him as in their top three, and I just never really. I've listened to him a couple of times, but I've never really got into it.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I suppose at that time, and I've listened and spoke to various people, and sort of acquiring music was actually quite difficult at times. I say acquiring, sort of buying albums. It wasn't that easy. You had to go to a record shop. Well, I belonged to a record library. And it was really good value. I think you had to pay £5 a year, and then you could just take out 4 records at a time. Use the trusty TDK D90 cassette and record all these albums.
Exactly.
But actually, getting hold of records could be just an absolute nightmare. You had to sometimes order them, and and they were quite. It was quite an investment at that stage in life. It was like $3.99 or $4.99, which took a while to get hold of. That sort of money, and then you had this big decision.
Quite a bit of dinner money, yeah.
Yeah, so you had to sort of wait to get the money together. But then by the time you got it together, you started doubting. Well, I did anyway, whether I really wanted it that badly. So it was.
Well, funnily enough, the same guy whose band I went to see, the first gig I went to, was the manager of the HMV in Wolverhampton as well. So we had a way to order records.
Well, yes, that's very useful. I just remember in the 70s there was a lot of places that would sell, I don't think, like washing machines and fridges and toasters, and then they had a little section with some records in that you'd.
Right.
I think that's where I bought the David Bowie album and.
Okay.
And possibly the Blondie one, actually. And I'll have to.
I remember getting lots of albums in what was that place? Coming to London to see my sister, and Record and Tape Exchange.
Oh yes,
I bought Closer.
Closer. Oh yes. Well, I do also remember, spending weekends, Saturdays, going just to secondhand record shops and
right
and charity shops, and it was just part of there was something to do really, and you just kind of go through this kind of like process of flicking through them and being very sort of intimidated because there was always somebody near you who'd be able to do it really quickly, flicking through with a fag in one hand and a sort of an amazing attitude. Now you felt very intimidated trying to keep up with them at that sort of speed, smoking in shops.
I used to go. I remember going for when I'm Your Man came out. Leonard Cohen album. I remember going to I didn't have enough money to buy it. But I went because I knew to the record shop anyway because I knew it had the lyrics on the back. Because I didn't have a camera, a phone, or anything like that. So I spent like an hour reading the lyrics on the back in the shop, then put it back, and went home. So I knew all the lyrics before I'd heard it all.
Well, that's good enough. So when you got to 16 and you said that's it, did you do your O levels or CSCs at that stage, or did you by then?
I did my O levels, and then I dropped out. I started A levels and then dropped out and left home and became a skint musician.
Yes, so this was kind of 82. You were kind of living in sort
83,
of 83, living in squalor.
The two of us moved into a student. I mean, me and Gary moved into a house of students, and then a bit later on, Whittle moved in as well, and we started doing gigs. There was a guy living there who was a drummer. Which was handy because that's what we needed. And he, funnily enough, he's doing quite well now. What's he called? Ramjack Corporation. He's like a DJ producer or something.
Right, it does happen. Yes, quite a few people who were in bands during that period. Yes, sort of used that experience to somehow become, I don't know, not a career in as a musician, but something connected to the entertainment industry. So it was, I suppose, a good apprenticeship in that way. But then one thing that I realised during these interviews and the 80s having so many indie bands was that there was fantastic jobs, like unemployment benefit and enterprise allowance schemes.
the Enterprise Alliance. Yeah.
The Enterprise Alliance game. So was that the
Creative
one?
writing.
Yes, you had creative writing, brilliant. You could do
I did.
anything, couldn't you? But you had to find £1,000 in a bank account. That's what always amazed me.
Not
Really.
from that one I did. I didn't. I just got 40 quid. I got 40 quid a week.
Nice.
No, 25. Was it 25 then? It's the 80s.
I don't think it was 40. I think in my
It must have
day
been 25.
it was something like £34.
Because I did a yob to start with. It was like a video music, but I got thrown off that after about 3 months for being late all the time or something like that. But it was really good.
Yes.
It was really interesting. It was teaching us how to make videos and stuff. But we weren't really concentrating. Then I realised I could do the Enterprise Allowance thing. They'd send someone around to see what I was doing every 3 months, But I was as a creative writer more than a musician. I was saying I was a writer.
Yeah.
But it was a bit of a farce, really, because
there was a lot of poets at that stage, weren't there? Fanzine writers who were writing
exactly that kind of stuff. Yes, exactly.
Writing frighteningly personal poetry that would sort of get into the soul of our lives, and also in '83 we had Morrissey came along and the Smiths. Did that have a sort of a significant moment for you? Was that a JFK moment?
No, not so much really. That was I don't know. I was always a bit suspicious of Morrissey. I don't know why.
God, that was very good. I wasn't. I just believed everything. I thought he was.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. But luckily, there was within that, there was always David Bowie throughout my life. And I loved, though the 80s period was difficult for David, we were such good friends, we weren't. I still find it kind of fascinating seeing an artist trying to, maneuver periods of life and knowing that sometimes actually that just not getting it right, but then coming back with another project and
he's
another.
the major. Don't you think over time he's the major artist?
There's just no one who's been even close to him. Other people you just think, you couldn't really look at Jagger or Keith Richards as sort of individual people and say, they had a complexity about them. And Paul McCartney again.
Do you know when I first started doing Penelope's Web, I got a lot of people saying to me, "Oh, you must like Bowie the way you sing and all that kind of stuff," And I'd say, I remember I used to say, "Not really." I'd say all my brothers and sisters play him, and I say I don't really listen to him that much. But then whenever a record of his comes on, I realise I knew all the words. So somehow he sort of seeped into my consciousness without really me realising. So.
Well, it's interesting because he'd write very memorable lines and lyrics, which when you read them and think, why does that work? And why do we sing it with such or know it with such passion? And yet, it's just the imagery. It's just like, God, that's, there's great lines that he wrote, like "We move like tigers on Vaseline." He's thinking that's a great line, but I'm not quite sure. And I don't know. It's just interesting when you have that ability. So then, as we were trucking through the 80s, indie pop becomes a big thing. I mean, it's, very simplistically, there's the punk, post-punk. Obviously, there would be rock and new romantics. There was the Paisley scene, goth scene, psychobilly. Then, there was this kind of, for me, 83, the indie pop world starts to really blossom at this point. And there's the labels, there's the kind of venues around the country, everybody having an alternative indie night of some description. And suddenly, we were dancing to the Mighty Lemon Drops and Mighty and the Darling Buds, the Primitives. We were flailing around like awkward people. So what was that period like for you? Because this must be kind of coming to your moment where your band developed.
That's when we started, really, when we started playing gigs. And because we played a few gigs in a sort of an underground place in Wolverhampton, where we were all from. And it built up quite quickly. We got quite a good response, and we got a build-up of crowd really quickly. We played 2-3 gigs there over a few months,
And was that as a 4-piece at this stage with Steve, John, Gavin, and yourself?
No. This is before Steve and John, and in fact, it's before Gavin. Gavin was our friend. Gavin was our producer, kind of.
Right.
He helped us do our first demo. But it was me, Gary, and Whittled, and we had drummer called Steve and a saxophonist called Barney. And we made an EP in 87. But in 84, 85, we played quite a lot of gigs and we got quite a good following, I suppose. In more, we sold out a few places in Wolverhampton where it was sort of great nights we had, And there was another band, the Sand Kings, they were playing around that time as well. And
The Sand
in
Kings.
Wolverhampton.
No,
yeah, I think they've got a compilation album out at the moment, I think, or something like that. But
right.
They were the Sand Kings' lead singer was the one who did Babylon Zoo, the one who had the worldwide hit.
Oh my God, Babylon Zoo! We
Spaceman. Yeah. He
was he jazz
man? Yeah, he was the lead singer of the Sand Kings, and he was the lead singer of another band in Wolverhampton before that as well. His name I've forgotten.
Right, there you go. So he was born in Dudley, West Midlands.
Oh, was he? Okay, right. Yeah, I knew he was. He was in Wolverhampton all the time when I was.
Yeah. My God, you must have fallen off your seat when Babylon Zoo appeared, and
that was quite strange. It was sort of after, so we weren't. It was a bit later on. That was.
It was the 90s. It was the Britpop John Major years, really, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah.
But the Sand Kings sort of appeared on. Was it on their own label, Long Beach Records?
Oh, is that what it was? Oh,
yes. Okay. But then you also had people. Were people like the Wonder Stuff and Pop Will Eat Itself and Ned's Atomic Dustbin?
I used to play football with the Wonder Stuff, actually. I used to play football with the guitarist.
Right.
But no, they were a bit older than us. I remember playing a gig. Do you know Mike Davis is? He's kind of the West Midlands John Peel of the 80s.
No.
Sort of, he wrote for things like Brumbeat, and he did all the reviews and all the what's on, and very good. He was like really, and he was really into all the Wonder Stuff, and he came to our gigs. He really picked up on us. He started giving us. That's how we started getting a crowd, really, because he gave us some reviews.
Yes,
I remember after he reviewed us playing a gig at JB's in Dudley, which is was a bit of a legendary venue in the 80s, and they were all there. People like the Wildflowers. Do you remember them? Another band, and what was the band you said before?
There was like Ned,
Mighty Lemon Drops.
The Mighty Lemon Drops, the Primitives. I guess they were slightly all Midland.
They were Coventry, the Primitives, weren't they? I think.
Yeah, and then from Birmingham it was Mighty and.
Oh, is that where Birmingham? They were from Birmingham. I didn't know that. I remember them being reviewed by Mike Davis all the time. Yeah.
And there was another, and there's a very, and then you had Barbarella's, didn't you? This famous club, and you had Robert Lloyd and the Nightingales.
Yeah, I played a gig with them. Yeah, he was in a band called Little Red Schoolhouse.
Right, and then you obviously had early members of, just the members of Duran Duran with.
Yeah, that's true. Do you know Scarlet Fantastic? Do you remember them? Do you?
Oh yes, good. That featured a woman called Maggie, didn't it?
I did a duet with her a few years ago.
Did you? I did an interview with her a few years ago as well. She's
lovely, but her brother was the Duran Duran photographer.
Right.
So she was telling me quite. She sort of went to what's that club called, the Rum Runner? Is that right? I think it's the Rum Runner. That's the name of the club that they all went to. They all hung out in the Duran Duran, and it was quite a scene, wasn't it, with New Romantics in Birmingham, I suppose.
Yeah.
They were.
Who was their first lead singer? Actually, it wasn't Simon Le Bon. It was God, I can't remember.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Yeah, Stephen Tintin.
Yeah, Duffy.
That's it. Yeah.
He went on to work on various Lilac Times, and then.
Oh, well done, the Lilac Time. Yeah.
And then he did a record with bizarrely Robbie Williams, actually. But
did he? Wow.
Yes, that was his pension plan sorted. So as you do, actually. Anyway, look, we digress. You're the band. It's doing well in Wolves. We can say Wolverhampton, home of Derek Dougan.
I'm a big Wolves fan, actually. But
oh God, and you had an amazing forward called Richards.
Steve Ball. Johnny Richards, yeah.
Oh, I'm a 70s, 80s person. I'm not.
Yeah, he was He was my hero as a kid, John Richards.
And a really good midfield player called Hibbert.
Kenny Hibbert, yeah.
I know, but it was Derek Dougan. My God, Derek.
Yeah, Derek Dougan's quite a charismatic figure.
Oh my God, and Robert Plant's a big fan, isn't he?
Yeah, he's still there now. He's like the chairman or something. Or
there's an amazing picture of him in the 80s with very tight shorts and a Wolves top on, running around with his big blonde locks. God, actually, right. Okay, that's Wolverhampton Football Club done. So look, yes, we must focus. The band has started in 1980.
Yeah, so Mike Davis starts reviewing us and stuff, and we start getting contacted by labels. I guess it's slightly different then, wasn't it? Because like we ended up having meetings with like EMI and things like that, you know. But also he put us in touch with a load of managers. And we ended up with, first of all, we had a bloke called, I can't remember his name, but he was the ex-manager of Sweet, talking of glam, 70s.
Yes.
Oh, Ben Bates, he was called, Ben Bates.
Oh,
he was
right.
I don't know what happened to him, but he didn't last for very long. He didn't really do anything for us.
No.
And we'd met with another manager called Robert Wace, who was the old manager of the Kinks. And he was the original manager of the Kinks, the first manager of the Kinks. And he, the band, we had sort of a democratic thing. And the band chose the other one, the Sweet guy. And so we went off and then he did nothing. And then the saxophonist went to live in Scotland. I went to live in London. And so I sort of, by now, Whithold had left the band and been replaced by Gavin, who'd been the producer. So now I said, I'm going to go and live in London. I'm going to find this guy, Robert Wace, the King's guy. And so I did that. And he signed me and Gavin. And we carried on as Penelope Swerve. And so we'd done an EP. We'd done an EP as the previous lineup on MTG.
This is called The Gap.
Yes. Which is quite funny because MTG was this 1987. I used to come and see my sister in London. I had a girlfriend in London as well. And I used to go on the tube and hear that voice saying, "Mind the Gap." You know?
Oh, yes.
So this is where we got the MTG from. And then I wrote a song with Using the Gap as I wrote the lyrics. So we put the Gap out on, and we had to think of a label name, so we got it MTG. You know? But that got us into a lot of meetings and stuff like that, but didn't really get us anything apart from, like I say, management thing. And in the end, I only took that up when I came down on my own. And then Robert started managing me and Gavin in London. So now Penelope's work was in London. This is about 89. Yeah, 88. Yes. Yeah. And so we got a drummer and a bass player, Steve and
John.
Yeah, and we were quite pleased to leave behind the saxophone, and we wanted to be like an ordinary band. I mean, a guitar and bass, you know.
So it's quite an interesting period, really, because by then, I remember when the Smiths broke up in 87, it felt, we were all getting a bit older and had enough of indie pop at that stage, I think. It was almost okay. And there was that new scene of, I suppose, new drugs like ecstasy.
Yes, exactly.
House music, Chicago house and Detroit. And obviously rap music had been around for a bit, but that was changing into gangster rap, which was a bit too, I don't know, for some liberal like me, it was just too much, really.
Yeah.
But there was definitely those bands who, some were new, but there were those like Primal Scream, the Soup Dragons, Happy Mondays. They managed to sort of consume the drugs and get the producer and get the new sound rather than sounding like a little indie band from the mid-80s. And that was quite something. But then you had the 4AD label and, we'd had the Copter Twins and Dead Can Dance, but then there was the, like, oh my God, the Pixies. Have you heard the Throw Muses? Have you? And obviously then in 89, Bleach came along from Nirvana, which was quite something. But obviously at that stage, it was still very John Peel, because he had a compilation he played called Sub Pop 100, and then he had one Sub Pop 200. So you had, we'd had Sonic Youth and the Buttholes and Big Black and or Husker Du, as we should say. So it was kind of exciting, but things were changing. So how were you in 89 with your lineup with Gavin, John, and Steve?
It was an interesting time, actually. We had a keyboard player for a little while as well. He played a couple of gigs for us.
Right. Did you get into that shoegazy scene in London with,
It got a bit... Do you know, it's interesting you said that, because it was... I think that's what the label gave us a load of their stuff to listen to. I don't know why. I never really understood why. I always thought it was quite odd. And it was all stuff like Spaceman 3.
Oh, right. They wanted you on harder drugs, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, sort of. And they had a band called Blow Up.
Blow Up? I remember there were compilations called the Blow Up compilations, but I think they were more than 90.
Oh, that's to do with a club, isn't it?
That was to do with another...
That was an indie club, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But there was also My Bloody Valentine. My Bloody Valentine.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Carter, the Unstoppable. There was Silverfish, the Faith Healers.
Yeah.
I don't know if Slow Dive had come along there, but Lush had appeared, hadn't they? Lush were... Yeah,
Lush. That's right. I was working in Archway. I remember there was a girl who was going out with someone from Lush was working with me.
Right.
But yeah, they were the what do they call it? The scene that celebrates itself or something. Right?
They were
all in Camden.
Oh, the Camden scene. I mean, there will be... the Fault. Yes, I know. There's a really nice book that's come out, which was done by, I think it's a guy called Joe Dealmore, who was the drummer of the Faith Healers, who took lots of pictures. Okay. And then I think last year, could have even been this year, he published this book of all these photographs, which obviously, as I was saying at the time, at the start, like all these pictures that people took, and they didn't really take enough at the time, really, because we didn't have cameras particularly. But now, people took them and they would go, yeah, they're great, but no one's interested. But then, fast forward 30, 40 years and you go, oh my God, these pictures are amazing. You must publish a book and let's do exhibitions and, and celebrate it all. So, yeah. So
Firestation's a bit like that, isn't it? That kind of... Do you know them, Firestation Records?
Yes, because they came along. There was. Is that Juve, isn't it?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And what's the other guy called? Olaf. Yeah.
Olaf and Juve. I know they were just. They've done amazing things. We praise them a lot. So 89, 90 was quite an interesting period at this stage, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it was also because we recorded the 2 singles with Cherry Red. And then they was going to be released in 1990. And we started playing... We played at Wolverhampton Poly, which was quite good for us, because it was sort of our hometown, And I can't remember who we played with. But and we were doing... and we got a bit of airplay. What's his name?
John Peel?
No. Whispering...
Oh, Whispering Bob Harris.
He played us 2 nights running, yeah.
Oh, my God.
So we thought, we're in here, but I don't know. Cherry Red was in a very strange state at that point, and it was kind of the manager wasn't talking to the managing director wasn't talking to the office manager because they'd been in a relationship, they'd broken up or something, And the other bloke who was the head man or whatever wasn't really talking to either of them, and all this kind of thing. And one of the bands was the cause of the breakup, I think, one of the band's lead singers or something like that. And it was all that kind of office politics and stuff, And
oh my God.
They kind of folded a bit.
And Cherry Red?
They cancelled all the bands. Penelope Square, Blow Up, the Charlottes. That was another Cherry Red band, wasn't it?
I remember the Charlottes because I think I saw them at the Arts Centre.
They dropped everybody, didn't they? I think, and they went kind of into a... And this is a comeback, isn't it? All this stuff with this, it's really impressive. With all
I think also, I don't know if it affected Cherry Red, but there were a few people who had labels and actually bands as well. That when the rough trade, I don't know, was it distribution, the company, because they kind of had major financial problems, so a lot of people just didn't. didn't get their I don't know, they either had the album, they couldn't get hold of it to sell it, or the distribution thing had all broken down. So a lot of people started losing kind of money, or they lost the moment, I suppose.
I understood that do you know who runs Cherry Red? Do you know who the owner is? Ian McNay. He's
oh yes, yeah.
In the 80s, or earlier maybe, he went and left it to. Can I just answer the phone to my son for a second? Hold on.
Oh yeah. Oh wait, I'll hit pause. Otherwise, we'll.
Sorry. Yeah.
I know we're back on. So yes, Ian. Ian
McNay. He was. I don't know if you know our manager Robert as well was quite a colourful, larger than life.
What was his name? Robert.
Robert Wace, and the WACE, and he was. He's like a sort of a. He's off the. He was the Epstein. He was like one of like they were out of a mould or something, and he was another one. Public school, very like 6'6" at least, something like a daddy long legs. But he got us a deal with Cherry Red as far as we could sell on the golf course. But Ian McNay wasn't around. He was he'd gone off to join like a religious sect or something.
Oh, good.
And then when he came back, out of the blue, it was being run by a bloke called Martin Costello. I don't know what happened to him, but when Ian McNay came back from his sect or whatever it was he was doing, he took over the company again, and cancelled all the bands, and so he didn't like what the guy had been doing, I guess is what they were saying.
Yes.
So he got rid of us all, so we were all sort of cast adrift.
It's always
and then they hadn't released our second single yet, which is why I knew that we had that stuffed away somewhere.
Right, but you did pop. I mean, Low Sun. I mean, that is one of the indie classic, really, isn't it?
It's a B-side.
It is a B-side as well. Yeah. I know. But where did you record that?
In Leamington. That's
Leamington Spa.
Woodbine. Yeah, which coincidentally is where I was born. But it's the only other time I've been there. I've only been there twice in my life. But John Rivers.
Oh my God, John Rivers, the famous.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking before that. Well, I remember being in a meeting in Cherry Red offices down in Fulham, and they were offering us the alternatives of who was going to be the producer, where we could record, and that kind of stuff. And the choice came down to, in the end, John Rivers or Robin Guthrie, which is why I was thinking about it when you were talking about all the sort of 4AD stuff.
Yeah.
And I vetoed Robin Guthrie, which is a really strange thing to do when I look back. I don't know why. What made me do that? But I said, no, we're not doing that. We go. And so I didn't even know who John Rivers was. So apart from that, they told us that he'd done Ghost Town. So he thought, well, you can't argue with Ghost Town's production, can you really? I don't know.
No, and I guess at that stage it might. I mean, John, who knows? But I think the Cocteau Twins were in a little bit of a mess at that point, weren't they? Dynamically and stuff. I don't think they were functioning that well. Who knows? But the sound is brilliant.
Yeah,
can you remember how you wrote that song and how it came together?
Yeah, that's because I didn't up to this point, until about 6 or 7 years ago, I didn't play any instrument at all. So at this point, I was just collaborating with somebody on writing songs all the time, But I sometimes I'd have the lyrics already, but mostly it was someone would play me something, and then we'd work on it. And I'd go off and come up with the lyrics. But I remember that was really John Thompson, the bass player, had a riff that he kept playing, which came to be the verse. And he just kept playing it to me when we were in the studio one time, I think, rehearsing.
And you thought, that's it?
I sort of went home with it in my head and worked out a line for it. And then we worked out a kind of a chorus to go with it. God,
it's a beautiful song. You must have, were you delighted, or were you pleased with it when you heard it?
Yeah. I like this. We did 4 songs with John Rivers, and the only one that doesn't really fit was Mistress Quickly. And we kind of did that that was the second song on the 12-inch, but we kind of did that because that had been the song that we thought we'd been given the impression that had been the song that had got us the deal with Joey Red.
Right.
But we just couldn't replicate the 4-track recording we did. We just couldn't work out what was different. Why we couldn't get the same energy into it or anything. It kind of lost its vigor completely when we listened back to it. When you listen to it now, it sounds like a little sort of folky song almost, whereas when we were playing it, it was quite a raucous kind of, So we thought, wow, I don't know. Sometimes you just can't. I suppose it's to do with the drums a little bit. And Steve was a new drummer as well. So, but did you know what happened to Steve and John?
No.
After Penelope's boat disintegrated, and Gavin went back to Wolverhampton, and we were kind of waiting for stuff to happen. Nothing was happening. And when we got airplay, when we got played by Whispering Bob and that, they didn't do anything with it. Do you know what I mean? Nobody capitalised it. I heard it's been played on GLR as well and stuff like that. It must have been more than once because just coincidentally I heard it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I thought, wow, okay. But no one was doing anything about it, and the record company was sort of losing interest in everything as far as I could see. And then they brought in a new guy, a young A&R guy, who was given our band to look after, who I think was a lot more, it's not his fault, but he was a lot more interested in the new kind of, baggy direction. And funnily enough, when Gavin went back to Wolverhampton, he went back to set up a dance label, but like a garage, not like a band thing at all. He stopped doing that completely and set up his own.
God, that's not. And then what about the other two, Gavin and Steve and John?
This is funny. They went off and joined Bad Manners and played in Bad Manners for like 10, 15 years.
My God, that must have been quite a surprise, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was extraordinary, really. Yeah, Steve first of all went off to America to get married, and then he got the job because they were touring America or something, I think, Bad Manners. And he broke John in. And then I went to see him once at the Law Society. That was quite funny in London. He got me on the guest list.
Nice.
Yeah, but
well, I could imagine seeing them up there probably was very strange.
Yeah, very strange.
And then the band at this stage.
So then I looked up Gary from the original Penelope's Band because he had moved to where he lived. He lived somewhere near London. I can't remember where he lived at that point.
Is this Gary McCormack?
Yes, McCormick. Yeah. Yeah, and me and him did some gigs, very low key, really, and we made a cassette that I noticed is you can get for £100. I don't know why. I've never seen any evidence that anyone's bought it, if I'm honest, but it's definitely on sale for £100, but online.
So, what do you call yourself at this stage?
That's, at this point, I'm Dominic Silvani for the first time.
Right, and then
that's kind of Robert was the manager who was kind of behind the. Then I.
So you kept your association with Robert Wise.
I kept my association with Robert Wise for a long time, until about well into the noughts.
Yes. Was he? Yeah. Did he have other musicians or bands that he was managing?
He had done before. It's funny because he before this he was the Kings. Then he was Steelers Wheel. He was their manager for a while.
Of course, yes, a great classic from the 70s.
Jerry Rafferty and all that stuff. Yeah. What was the other bloke called? Egan, something Egan. I can't remember his name actually. But I met Ray Davis once as well I bumped into him in Hampstead. He was walking his dog, and I said to him, "Oh, hello," and I thought he could see a look in his face. Oh no, this bloke's going to talk to me. And I said, "No, I'm managed by Robert." And he said, "Oh, how is the old boy?" And and he got me some tickets for the Kinks gig, and they talked for the first time in 10 years or something like that. So
Oh, that's nice. You brought them together, actually.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
they are quite extraordinary characters, haven't they? They sort of live in an altered universe, really, don't they? Of
Incredible. Yeah.
babbling and bubbling along and
Yes.
spuffling. They spuffle a lot. Did he have great stories and sort of, you know?
Robert.
Yes.
Robert was a very eccentric man and very everywhere you went, he got all the attention. Do you know what I mean? Because he was such a outlandish figure. He's sort of like a cartoon. Do you know what I mean? In my mind now, I see him as like a cartoon. He's like this huge, daddy long legs of a bloke in a camel coat, and sort of talking. We used to say, he took me and Gavin in this cafe, and he said he got the manager, and he said, "Can you find us somewhere very quiet? We need to have a very important meeting." And the bloke said, "Oh yeah, I'll show you to." He showed us to like a little alcove, where we sat in, and then Robert proceeded to talk so loud that you could have heard he was stood outside. You know what I mean, in the street. So it was all an act anyway.
Yeah.
But it was funny. Yeah. And my girlfriend at the time used to say to me, "Whatever happens, you've got some good stories to tell your grandkids," because of Robert, because he was so eccentric.
Was he a little bit like Monty in With Nell and I? Did he have that kind of?
Yeah, but not. Yes, but without the. Yeah, but a very tall and thin, and everyone always had questions about his. I don't know what you call it, proclivities.
Well, quite.
Nobody was quite sure what he was. You know what I mean? He was kind of, I don't know, asexual, I suppose you'd say. But
yes, a dandy, a nice, a sort of, I guess.
Dandy, exactly. That's exactly what he called himself, a dandy.
Oh, did he? Yeah, there was a sort of like, you just, who knows? But did you ever manage to sort of get to see his house?
Oh yeah. I've been to his house and stuff like that. I've been to his sister's house as well, which was incredible in Belgravia. But he was he's the well-respected man about town. He's he's a dedicated follower of fashion. He's the inspiration for both of them. And he's also the one in Lola who goes home with the transgender, but he doesn't realise.
Oh,
so it's too late. Yeah.
So he's part of our sort of pop heritage, really, isn't he? Yeah. Is he still alive?
I don't know. Do you know? I haven't seen him for, I'd say, 15, maybe 20 years. My God, that's incredible to think that that's true.
Yes, but time does whiz by. Actually, how did his family have the money? Were they in some?
I don't know what his dad was. Yeah, but he didn't. He went to Marlborough. You know what I mean? And he didn't appear to. By the end, though, he got a job at the Foreign Office. The last time I saw him, he'd got a job at the Foreign Office.
I could imagine he would. Yes,
it was a funny character.
So then, for you, so you've got another small band after the sort of two members, everyone breaking up. So how do your 90s play out? I
did lots of. I started having children, and in the 90s, but I also. Started to work a bit more, But I did lots of different bands. I had a band called Vicious at one point, I remember, for a few gigs. And then I was doing stuff with my friend at the end of the 90s. I started recording stuff with Andy Mitty,
right,
who is half of the Avant-Garde, which is kind of who I've been. The band that I've performed with over the last 10 years or so, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So really, it's been a case of sort of juggling your day job with your.
Yeah, I sort of drifted for a bit, and writing as well. I did a lot of writing, but I've got 6 children. So in the 90s, early noughts, I had 4 young sons.
Right.
And I started working more. I started a youth football club that I ran with my 2 oldest sons and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, but I still played gigs and did recordings and stuff with Andy and that. But then in about what year is it now? So about 15, I think. I started to learn to play the guitar.
Right. So this is a big change in life.
Yeah. I've done it in about 2000. I'd done about 5 gigs on my own, but found it such an excruciating, nerve-wracking experience that it put me off for a while, and it put me off playing the guitar for nearly 15 years, I suppose. But it. When I started playing the guitar again, I've never been nervous singing, ever. But when I started playing the guitar, I was just terrified for about 2 years. In a really strange kind of unexpected way. Like I couldn't get my fingers to work and stuff because I was so nervous. But fortunately, I found like a really welcoming scene in London, a kind of underground alternative folk scene, which is where I've kind of resided for the last 10 years, really.
Right.
But, funnily enough, this week, Witold Leonovich, the original member of Penelope's Web,
yes,
I talk to and meet up with occasionally. He's the one that I still see out of the band, really. He said to me, we were talking about re-recording some of the original Penelope's Web songs and writing some new ones as well. Because so I'm doing the band with the Avant-Garde with Andy, who lives in Cambridge, and so we're plotting an album to release this year. We're going to do some gigs in the autumn with a 4-piece, with or maybe a drum machine. I'm not sure which, but we did a few last year and the year before. But we're sort of working on the whole album before. And I'm also doing regular gigs on my own. I'm going to do some stuff with Witold, but weirdly, I also. Because of a song that the Avant-Garde did called Forget, which got quite a lot of views on YouTube and Spotify, and I got approached by a Spanish DJ producer who did a remix of it, but then also handed it on to another friend who's a producer DJ called Duncan Gray, who's on Andy Weatherall's label. And he asked me to collaborate with him on a couple of songs. This is about 7 or 8 years ago, I think, yeah. And so I did. And last year, as a kind of tribute to Andy Weatherall, who died, I think it's 10 years ago, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Is it 10 years? Is that right?
It's a long time. I can't quite remember, but it does seem to have
Yeah. But they did on his label, A Love from Outer Space. They've set up a label. It was his club, and it was a show, I think. I'm not really particularly well versed in this scene, but nevertheless, I did this song that with Duncan Gray that got picked up and put on this A Love from Outer Space compilation that came out about 2 months ago. And suddenly I've got loads of plays on Spotify, and I literally at one point just before this record came out, I had something like 19 monthly listeners, and then within 2 weeks I had 5,019, so, which was a bit odd and a bit weird. It settled at exactly that amount as well, just to really drive it home. It's on its way back down now. It's down to about 1,000, I think, but still going.
Well, it's quite nice to suddenly
it's extraordinary out of nowhere, yeah, as well. And somebody came up to me the other day at one of my gigs that I did in London. A poet girl came up to me and she said, "That's very Ian Curtis." She said, "That song that you've done, that dance track was."
You must have been chuffed to bits.
I was, yeah. But I thought it was quite interesting as well, because I hadn't thought about that at any point, really.
No.
So the idea that I've reached there after 50 or 40 years or whatever, it's quite funny. 40 years later.
Yeah, so you've got various bits on.
So I've got all these weird things going on at the same time. Yeah,
yes, it's suddenly become quite busy, and you've got your Bandcamp page, which has got your solo material. Yes, I've been playing that, and then the Avant-Garde as well.
Yeah,
so there's that. So just to recap, that's started
there's a possibility that I could put out 2 albums this year, which would be funny because not that I've put any out before, apart from the Firestation compilation one.
No, absolutely. So, and how did that? And how did that And how did I know it's always good to get going at some stage. But how did your Yeah, how did Firestation Records come into?
That's extraordinary. That's just with the internet and all that. It suddenly occurred to me. I wrote Penelope's Web in Google, and it took me to a page or a link took me to a page that said we're looking for members of these bands, and it was a Firestation page, and it was them saying, we want to put records out by these bands, but we don't know where they are, and we're trying to find them. And so I wrote to them. Initially, I pretended to be my partner.
Yes.
Saying, I think I know where I can find. Just because I thought, what is this? And then I wrote to them, and they put The Gap on a compilation album. And then a bit later said to me, could you put an album together, but not using any of the Cherry Red recordings? So have you got demos and stuff? I really, what's the word? I sort of bodged that together with some shocking recordings. Right. But they seemed happy. They seem to think it's more about collector's item than anything else. Because he said to me that the cassette, the Dominic Silvani cassette that Robert paid for in the 90s, and that he said to me, have you got any of them? And I said, I can send you one. I said, I've got a few left. And he said, I could sell them for you. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I know people who paid good money for them. And I said, I've only got 4 or 5, don't worry about it, kind of thing. Don't know why. I should have said, yes, here they are. But then I suspect that the one that I see online for 100 quid
is one of those.
Might be the one I sent him, which is really annoying.
I often see the price of these things and I sort of mutter to myself, God, that's so much. But then it's like, but has anyone ever bought one of these?
Exactly. There's no evidence.
That's like 500. You think, my God, I wish I'd kept that. That was that's worth £1,000. It's like, yeah, but has anybody ever bought it at £1,000? So. Yeah, I know. So it's not worth worrying about. Yeah. So
the saxophonist told me pick one up he picked a Penelope's Web vinyl up in a boot sale in Edinburgh.
Yeah, but it must be nice. And with Cherry Red sort of picking away different years as they do these compilations. Because I think you've appeared on several of their. God, there was
2 of them. 2 so far.
There was one which was about stars colliding, wasn't there?
Yes, that's Slow Sun, wasn't it? I think. Yeah.
Yeah, which was quite nice, and then obviously various other ones. So just to recap, so I'm paying attention here, obviously. But so you've got potentially new material coming out as Penelope's Web. With the possibility of doing a Taylor Swift and recording some of those classics, so you can then own them, I guess.
Well, it's just I said to him the other day, shall we re-record Rebecca? Which we had this, we used to play this like sort of 9-minute goth song.
Nice.
It had like a 4.5-minute intro, you know what I mean, and all this kind of winding, very slow, and basically based around the Daphne du Maurier novel Rebecca.
Nice.
And weirdly, we'd be really shy about playing it because we thought, no one will listen to that, but it always went down the best. And I said to him, do you think we should try and record that somehow?
Definitely. Well, it's interesting. Have you listened to the latest album by The Cure, by any chance?
No, I haven't actually, but I've seen lots of people raving about it and saying how much they like it.
It is extraordinary. But if you listen to the last song, which is the end song, I think it's called, or the end. I mean, it kind of works as a piece, from the side one, first track, to the last track on side 2, even if you're using Spotify. It starts very slowly, that song, but then the lyrics come in and you get quite drifty with it. And it's the most amazing, it's up there, I think, with Black Star, actually. It's David Bowie's. It's just got, and there's songs about losing his brother and life. And it's very melancholic, but it's that last song. I think if you listen to that and that introduction which goes on, you think, well, this is nice, I'm quite enjoying it, and then suddenly the lyrics come in, and again it's got a mood to the whole thing which feels a bit like, anyway, it's I wouldn't say it's uplifting, but I think it's quite extraordinary to hear. So you're thinking of sort of recording some of classics
Yeah.
from them, and then writing some new material as well.
Yeah, we've already been working on a bit of new material. He sent me a few
And
bits.
what happened to the two members who went to Bad Manners? Obviously, they stayed there for 10 years, but are they in contact or possibly?
Steve, I see on Facebook. He's in America,
Right.
and he's married with kids. He left to go. He left the band that I was in after. With the band I said I was in, where we played a few gigs for Vicious, he played the drums for us for a little bit. Before he came back, he'd been on tour or something like that with Bad Manners. He came back and did a few gigs with us, and then he went off again. But this time he went off to get married.
That was it.
To live in America. He said, "I'm going to go and chasing after a woman," sort of.
Yeah.
He stayed with this whole time and had children.
That sounds romantic.
Yeah.
Oh,
He made the right decision.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've sort of got a lot of projects that are coming up. And I notice on your Facebook page as Dominic, not as all the others, you play a lot of gigs, don't you? Live
I play
shows.
a lot in London, and I play regularly at the Betsy Trotwood, a thing called the Lantern Society.
Right.
And I also play a lot of gigs. I play a lot of gigs with a guy called Gabriel Moreno, who's a kind of a Gibraltar Leonard Cohen figure.
Right.
And I've got some really good friends. Jeremy Tuplin is another singer-songwriter there on the sort of London scene. They're both on tour in Italy at the moment, actually. I did a tour with Jeremy in Germany a couple of years ago as well, and just playing on my own. Do you know what I mean? So since I've learned to play the basic acoustic,
you can get out there and do it. Actually, well, it's
and I've written lots of songs on my own as well, which is kind of all the stuff online is new stuff, really. I mean, all
that's
the stuff
fantastic. I mean, it's got to be done. Yeah, but I just noticed that you're very prolific at the moment, playing once a week, once a fortnight.
Yeah, a couple of times a month, 2 or 3 times a month. I've got another gig actually in Borough coming up as well.
Yes. And what is the Lantern Society?
It's sort of a folk, alternative folk. It's very impressive. That guy Gabriel Moreno, he used to run the Lantern Society, but now he runs a thing called Poetry Mondays, which I help him run, and in King's Cross. But the Lantern Society is a bit of a legendary alternative folk venue. It's not, what's the word, that it's not, you don't just turn up and play, you have to book. But you play 2 or 3 songs. Everybody plays 2 or 3 songs.
Right.
And it's been some amazing. I've seen some amazing artists there. Incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's good to sort of have those scenes. I know from Norwich, they used to have something like that at a bar on a Friday night, Jernet's Bar on King Street. Right. And again, you'd go there and everyone would play. I think there were 4 songs, relatively not, at a good length, not, prog rock length. And so it was very, I mean, you got some great stuff and some people who were having a go for the first time to see if it was going to be their thing. So it was all encouraging, which is always nice to know. Right. So, yes, well, that's brilliant. Well, look, Dominic, thank you ever so much for your time for this. I'm so pleased that we managed to sort of, get this together. And I've been, because I do the interviews and also do the a sort of show on Future Radio, which is mostly just the music. So I've been playing quite, the Willoughby's web. But the trouble is, I only have 2 songs which I alternate.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lack of material that.
There is distinctly in there. Yeah. Let's hope they put Political Nightmare up as well.
Yeah, I'll have to try and track that down because I noticed Spotify's got a few bits here and there, haven't they? I've been playing bits today. I don't know what Spotify got. I know. I suppose it's the cure for the musician, isn't it? Really, Spotify, but it is also quite useful. Yeah. So I guess with sort of so you've just got Mistress Quickly, haven't you?
Yeah, that's the other song.
It's all the usual, and then on your side it's
some of my new stuff. Yeah. But
Yeah.
the Avant-Garde, I put the Avant-Garde on. There's a song on there that gets quite a lot of plays.
Yes.
Still.
Well, I'll have a look. Avant-Garde.
Yeah.
Well, I know home taping's killing music. I know it didn't really, did it? So Ava, is this the one that's called Forget?
That's it. Yeah.
And Parasite.
Yes. Yeah. We'll be putting a load of new stuff on there this year, definitely. We've recorded. We did a lot of gigs with about 8-9 songs last year. We thought we'd do another 8 or 9 new songs this year, so we've got about nearly 20, 18 to 20. And then we're going to put an album out.
Fantastic. God, it sounds like you're busier than ever, actually.
Yeah. No, I am really. And in the music terms, that's really true. Yeah.
Well, I know that one of the members of Shelley Ann Orphan, Jem, who I think he was a band with Caroline, and she sadly passed away. But he's recently done a project as well with Boris, who was the drummer with The Cure for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of people are sort of coming back and are recording that album that they've been meaning to do for the last 20 years.
Right.
So I think it's all good.
That's a great thing for me as well, is because of this kind of scene in London. I know lots of different musicians now who can play all the different, So me and Whittle will have a great time there because we can find like a violinist for Penelope as well.
Yes.
Which we never had in those days. We'll be able to find anything we want really, because it's a good scene for that.
Brilliant. Well, look, Dominic, if you want, I can always send you the link to this, and then you can always put it on your social media platform sites, and that would be fantastic. So, but yeah, thank you for your time. And yes, it's always good to get the story of a band. There you go. Yeah. Anyway, look, I'll let you go, but thanks again for your time, and best of luck for the year. Yeah.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview, or conversation, really. But yes, massive thank you to Dominic for giving me the time for that. If you want to know any more information about his musical world, various social media platform sites are good. And this has been the C86 show. If you want to contact me, you can, again, check out Facebook, Instagram, just do C86 show, and send me a message. All these fascinating interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, so check them out. Have a great week. Stay safe.